Hi, this is Dr. Dan Radner. Today I'm joined by Tamara and Rita, one a mind-body author and advocate for CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome, and another a mind-body coach also specializing in that. These two connected over the TMS Wiki and put their heads together on how to treat people with more chronic and diffuse conditions and help them get better. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below and I'll get back to you personally. And finally, you can reserve your place in any one of my seminars or purchase any of my mind-body guides, also known as the PDFs, at www.crushingdoubt.org. Now, without further ado, here's Rita and Tamara. Rita and Tamara, it is a pleasure having you on the show. I apologize that you're coming on the show when I have a bit of a mind-body cold, but in a way that's very instructive. So my voice sounds a little coldish, but it comes from the things we know. Stress, all the psychological experiences can lead to physical things. And speaking of that, we're going to hear about how you two came together, but first I want to hear your individual stories. And so, Rita, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay.
Sure. So I just want to say how happy I am to be here, Dan. I'm an avid viewer, and you do so much valuable work for this community.
Thank you so much.
Mention that. So I hope that by sharing my CRPS story, I can let sufferers know that this is totally reversible. So my story, I'll give the highlights. Before my descent into the abyss of CRPS, which was actually called RSD back in 2013, it was preceded by other forms of mind-body syndromes in my life. After I was married, for example, I had interstitial cystitis, which is a painful bladder condition. And then after my younger son was diagnosed with autism, I found myself on this devastating trajectory of relentless caretaking and advocating, and things just went from bad to worse to worse. My son regressed, he lost his words. And I was in survival mode. So in order to cope, I repressed a great deal of emotions, especially the ugly and unacceptable ones, and that weren't aligned with my self-image. So I was doing a lot of repressing at the time. And fast forward 5 years, when my son was 5, I developed mysterious leg pain in both legs. This went on for a year and a half. I bounced around from doctor to PT. I was taking 8 Ultrams a day. I was at my wit's end. Nobody knew what I had. And I was jolted by the memory of Howard Stern, who I had listened to since I was 14 years old. And I remembered that he had dedicated a book to Dr. Sarno. So that day I ordered Healing Back Pain. And the day that book came in the mail was the day that changed my life. I saw myself on every page. I inhaled it within half an hour, and it was just a revelation. And within 4 months, I was one of those people that had the book cure, as they say.
Right.
But unfortunately, knowledge is often not enough, and there was more work to be done, especially in the emotional category. So a few months later, my brain upped the ante, and this time it started in my right foot, in my big toe. I thought I had sprained my toe. The pain spread through my right foot, and then did a mirror image to the left foot. So right there, you see brain involvement, the mirror image.
Right.
I just wanted to note that. Then it spread to both the knees, and at one point I went full body. And to describe my hellish symptoms, not only did I experience agonizing, stabbing, and burning pain, but my brain, these signals and the immensity of the pain actually started to alter my physiology. So you could see visually changes that were occurring. I had extreme redness, I had swelling, I had temperature changes, and I even had bone marrow edema in every toe on the MRI.
Wow.
So this visual preoccupation created an extra layer for the TMS to hide behind, essentially.
Wow. You're illustrating it really well how very, very real the physiology is that comes from this.
Yes.
It is not in your head.
Exactly.
it's from the head, and then it becomes very real in the body. Now, Rita, I want you just to hold your story there, because
Yes.
I want to jump over to Tamara and hear about her story, and then we're going to start to synthesize. How did this come together? Tamara, tell us your story.
So my story is very similar. 2015, after several years of pretty stressful life, one day I woke up, my left wrist was swollen and my fingers lost mobility. My middle finger curled in and got really, really tense. And I had severe stabbing pain in my left hand. And then I went to a doctor. They diagnosed me with carpal tunnel syndrome, gave me the brace, I had to use and stuff like that. And then it started going down the drain pretty quickly. So within about 3 months, I had swelling, dystonia, involuntary contraction of the muscles. My both hands got impacted. It jumped on my right hand. I developed Reynaud Syndrome when fingers turn white, then purple, then blue. The blood flow stops, severe pain, spasmodic pain, just nonstop. And then skin changes. My skin started kind of feeling thin and extremely sensitive to cold and touch. And so eventually I became so desperate, and my doctors kept saying it's carpal tunnel syndrome, and we can get you painkillers. I was offered tramadol. I was offered steroid injections, and if that doesn't help, we'll consider surgery. So the pain was neuropathic pain. It was a feeling like fire ants were crawling under my skin. Hands, wrists, forearms was getting into shoulders. And then what really got me into complete free fall of panic, anxiety, and fear was that one day I realized that because it was so severe in my hands, I wasn't paying attention to my feet and my ankles. And all of a sudden I realized that dystonia started spreading to my feet and ankles. They were really, really getting tight, inflexible. Keep the story short, I was fortunate. I finally, after about a couple months of fighting with my doctor, I got referral to physical therapy, and physical therapy told me, I think I know what it is. It's called CRPS. And at first I got excited because at least I had something that made sense. But then I realized that was kind of a death sentence because the common knowledge is that CRPS is incurable and it is likely to get worse and worse. And was very fortunate. A friend of mine told me about Dr. Sarno. First time she told me, I said, well, he's specializing in back pain. What does it have to do with me? And then she repeated it about a couple months later. And then finally I was listening. Once people hit the bottom, they start listening. And I immediately ordered Dr. Sarno's book, Mind Body Prescription. And exactly like Rita said, I saw myself on every page of the book. And that's how my journey started. And within 2 years, I was able to beat CRPS. It was a long road, but I managed to get out of it.
What were the things along the way that that allowed you guys to get better? Rita, you described a book cure, but then secondarily, you had to work on it.
So I have to rewind a bit. At the time in 2013, there was very little in the TMS literature about CRPS, very little. And although I was on the wiki, I seem to have been the only member with this condition. So that created doubt. And in my desperation, I actually went down a lot of rabbit holes. I was misdiagnosed with Lyme disease and rheumatoid arthritis. I tried drugs, nerve blocks, Calmara therapy, bisphosphonate infusions in Italy. I flew to Italy. And lastly, I had ketamine infusion, which were incredibly unpleasant and traumatic. Ketamine was a very traumatic experience. And of course, none of it helped one whit. And it all culminated in the summer of 2014 when I found myself bedridden, barely able to walk. I was using a wheelchair. Things were so dark that I fantasized about suicide constantly. And at that point, I called Dr. Howard Schubner. And that was a turning point for me, because Dr. Schubner gave me that rubber stamp that CRPS was still stemming from the brain. It was just a more extreme form of mind-body syndrome. And so it was such a relief to me, because I knew if I could do it before, I would turn this battleship around again. Somehow I was determined to do it. And I really had to come to the realization that my brain was still using TMS as a defense mechanism to cope. It was still using TMS.
Right.
So I think that was a big turning point for me when I called Dr. Schubner.
That makes a lot of sense. And how about for you, Tamara? What was the turning point? The book cure, or where did it go from there?
Well, obviously, the book made a huge impact on me.
Right, but you said it took 2 years, so
it took 2 years, but it was a slow crawl, and within a couple months, I started sleeping better. What I think was one of the major factors to me developing CRPS was that I had chronic severe insomnia for many years prior.
Right.
All of a sudden, after I read Dr. Sarno's book, I started sleeping better. I can't explain that, but my sleep improved very quickly. It is still not, perfect. I still have bad nights and all that, but I do have mostly healthy, normal sleep, which I didn't have for years before it finally hit me with CRPS. So that was the first round. Pretty quickly, I'm one of those obsessive Google searchers, and I found TMS Wiki, TMS forum, and this is where Rita and I eventually met. Although not when I was in my desperation, I didn't know her at that time. It was only after I recovered that wrote the book we connected. But slowly, I started looking for help on the TMS forum. And I went to Dr. Roger Geitzel, who is listed in the directory, because I wanted to have a reassurance that CRPS, in fact, is a mind-body syndrome. And Dr. Sarno very briefly mentioned RSD, the old name for it, in his book, that he suspected that it was also mind-body phenomenon. But I was so paranoid, I was so scared, I needed somebody to tell me for sure that that's what it was. And so he got me going. Eventually, within about 6 months, my neuropathy pretty much disappeared. But then it was replaced by what I think was pretty clearly fibromyalgia. Mm-hmm. All the symptoms, I didn't bother to go and get a diagnosis because I knew it was what Dr. Sarno described as extinction bursts. Right. So I had pretty serious fibromyalgia. I still had dystonia. And so for about another 6-7 months, I was struggling with both of them until eventually dystonia, fibromyalgia left me probably after another 6-7 months, and dystonia started slowly losing its grip on me. And eventually I got rid of pain, dystonia, and regained dexterity in my hands, arms, feet, everything.
So I just want to highlight one thing, because this really fits with my work. As you guys know, when your guys' belief systems changed, for better or worse, that's when you saw the symptoms change. Like when you had the mirroring experience.
Yes.
It was, I mean, at the moment you thought of the mirroring, it happened. Or Tamara, for you, as the moment you were like, wait, I haven't been paying attention to my feet. Boom, it was there. It shows that the belief system takes us wherever it goes. And that's the thing, is we can get a hold of that in the other direction. But it is particularly hard when you don't have people saying, yes, same thing, treat it the same way. But when you got some of that, you started getting better. So, we know that there's different manifestations of mind-body experience. And one of the things you guys were clearly up against is that you had one of these manifestations that felt extra hopeless. There were extra symptoms. It was less explained. There was less literature about it. The people on the TMS Wiki weren't talking about it as much. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to have you guys on, because I have certain patients who have this, or some version of it, and they are understandably at their wits' end and hopeless. And so I wondered, Tamara, let's start with you. If you can talk about what your experience was with this particular form of mind-body experience and how you think about it now.
So I'm by my nature not the most optimistic person. Mm-hmm. And so I realized that unless I truly believe in myself that I can beat it, I will not recover. When I realized that what I have is a curable condition, that I can heal from it, it was at the same time extremely liberating. But also I felt the burden that I had to figure out how to get out of it.
Right.
And so the TMS form was a godsend, because there were all these people who recovered from various conditions, although very few recovered from what I had. And something that I see time and over in people with mind-body syndrome is that they need to find somebody who had exactly the same set of symptoms. And if your pain is not in your thumb, but in your index finger, that doesn't count. It's a wrong place. It's got to be precisely like mine. Or if you are a man and I'm a woman, no, we're different. It cannot be exactly the same way. And so you go through that disbelief, you go through the doubt. And the doubt, interesting, your podcast is called Crushing Doubt. It crushes you, it kills you all the time. Yeah. And I worked with a psychologist from LA Pain Psychology Center, Amber Murphy, and she was great. We spent probably 10 sessions. She knew that I was fearful, and she kept pounding in my head that I need to get rid of my fear. And eventually it started sinking in. But for reasons, Amber was phenomenal. I had my own internal reasons why I couldn't continue with her. After that, I kind of went on my own. But the lesson that she gave me, by the way, she stayed in touch with me for a very long time after, kind of encouraging me, even though she wasn't paid for her work. I needed to build up that confidence. Not only that CRPS is a reversible condition, but also that this little me, so powerless, so so fearful, so incapable of anything, that I can actually do it. Yeah. And so step by step, I started building my confidence.
Yeah, and that's something I'm going to get to right after this. I want to get to what I call the power column. You know, how you start to live your powerful life. But Rita, I want to turn back to you in relation to this. I just want to note something Tamara said and get your observations on it.
Yeah.
It is very important because I get these questions all the time. Okay, I know that can be TMS. I know that can be mind body. I know this can be, but can this be? And I'll tell you, my internal experience of that is yes, because if the body already has the functionality to do all of these things, so if that's true, and the mind can control the body in any of these things, then it can control them in all of them. That's my way of thinking about it. Rita, does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. And even at the time, it made total sense to me. I mean, people have gone blind that were not really blind, or they were paralyzed that were not really paralyzed. And you see this with phantom limb syndrome. One of the most harrowing aspects of CRPS is that people get amputations of their limbs and they're still in pain. And so nobody had to convince me that this was psychogenic at all. The where I had to tackle doubt was throughout my doubt was sort of pervasive throughout my life. I had self-doubt, I had doubts about my life, but I didn't have any doubt in TMS at all, fortunately. So yes, tackling doubt was a big part of my recovery.
One thing that I'm hearing in what you're saying, Rita, though, is that, and I think this was true for you both, you conquer doubt in one area, and it's a building block for another. There are times where you get knocked back, it's true.
Yeah.
But you get a building block with one symptom, and then you think, well, wait, why would there be this thing, CRPS, that couldn't get better? That really seems to be operating the exact same way. I will grant you, though, and I think you guys will agree with this, the more symptoms you have, the more diffuse they are, the less common they are, the more doubt there will be. Does that ring true to you guys?
Yes, but the more it's evidence that it's a mind-body syndrome as well.
Exactly.
After you come out on the other end of it, then you understand that the more bizarre your symptoms are, the more likely it is a mind-body game. It's the game that your brain is playing with you. Yeah. But for the person who is in the throes of it, in the depths of misery, it's not that evident.
Absolutely, and that's a great way. It's a great way of putting it. That, you know, it is both evidence that is mind-body. The more bizarre the symptoms are. When I hear the word bizarre, when people describe the symptoms, I'm like, that's raising some antenna about this. But it really is hard for them to see their way out, and it's so important to have these stories. So I'm going to finish up on this with you guys. In my experience, when I got better from my symptoms, a curious thing happened, and you guys have heard me talk about this on the podcast. I started to see that I wasn't living powerfully, that I didn't feel that I could. Now, since you guys recovered, Tamara, you've written a book on this as an advocate for people with these conditions, and Rita, you've become a mind-body coach, and both are really powerful positions to assume. So I just wondered if you each could speak to that. Rita, we'll start with you, and then we'll finish with Tamara.
Oh, sure. Well, I think for me, being a coach is an honor and a privilege because I was determined to give back. And I figured if I have to be the first one that beats this CRPS label, that reverses it, then I'll be the first one. And so I think that in terms of how I made my way out of CRPS, a lot of it, as you mentioned before, dismantling the false beliefs we have about ourselves. These false beliefs I had formed a prison in my mind, and it was playing out on the stage of my body. And some of that was also from medicalization, from labels that physicians give you, from these dire prognoses, just these horror stories. So I had to throw all that out the window. I also, like Tamara, had therapy with a TMS therapist. And it was fairly long-term in my case. I had to work in every area you can imagine in order, my journey was pretty intense. And then I think I had to make some very practical life changes. And that involved, you know, cultivating safety in my life, self-empowerment, as you mentioned. I think my entire life was sort of defined by self-betrayal. Like I never went through the world, you know, just honest with myself. And I was never, it's like that expression, to thine own self be true. Mm-hmm. I was not living that adage. And I realized that was the fundamental piece that was missing. And that's what it formed my prison. I was living on the terms of what others thought, or what I thought others thought I should be doing. So self-agency, authenticity, these were all portals out of the hell I found myself in.
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight that you got out of the physical hell of it, but you also got out of other hell, and that's what happened for me too. So let me hear from you, Tamara, and we'll wrap up on this, but then we'll bring you back at some point, because people are going to really want to hear from you because of what you've mastered and how you think about it.
So it's the same story. You know, I joke that all the brave things in my life I did out of fear. And I was always worried. I was always worried about how others think of me. I was always worried that I will not be able to do what I'm supposed to do. And also, I was always pushing myself beyond my limits, beyond my physical and mental abilities. And what I learned was that by actually slowing myself down, I can move faster. By being cognizant of what my true intentions are, by mindfulness and understanding myself, I can achieve much more than I could achieve before. And the main thing is that now I move in life with less fear. I'm more confident, and therefore maybe more trustful of other people, because by being more mindful of myself, I'm more mindful of other people too.
It makes all the sense in the world. I think in some ways there's a fear and power continuum, which is one of the reasons why you can use power to get out of fear, but you can also conquer fears and it leads to power. So guys, I want to thank you for coming on here. This is the beginning of a conversation, because I think we'll have more of these. We can have you back on. We can potentially have a Q&A where people can talk to you guys about this. So it's very important, and I just want to thank you again for joining me, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan, for doing what you're doing. It is incredibly important for people to hear, to learn, to hear your Q&A sessions. Thank you very much for bringing us on your podcast.
Well, thank you so much, and I will see you guys soon.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I was really excited to have these two on for multiple reasons, but one of them is that I keep thinking about the people who are telling me that they have conditions that they don't hear about anywhere else, and that they're more diffuse or they're more complicated. And I don't blame them for saying that. I'm not even saying they're wrong, but this is a good example of how the systems can be applied to anything. Sure, maybe it takes longer to work through, but these two are proof that you can do it, and that it really is about that belief system, and I'm here to help. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below, and we'll get back to you personally.